Okay, hi guys and gals, boys and girls. I wanted to make a short video about schizophrenia. One disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a medical doctor, um, but I have had a unique series of experiences that makes me, if I can even use this word, qualified to talk about many subjects in an interdisciplinary and a cross-curriculum way. And so I offer a perspective that maybe you're not even going to get listening to qualified professionals. You decide. Okay, we all have an idea internally of what schizophrenia is. Somebody who is schizophrenic is somebody who has lost contact with reality. Maybe they hear imaginary voices or they attribute a reality to their thoughts and imaginations that isn't the case. Maybe they see things that aren't there. Maybe they hear things that aren't there. Somebody who's schizophrenic can also be paranoid and uh, take two and two and make 5,000. So there are different types of schizophrenia, but they refer to somebody who has lost contact with reality and suffers delusions. And sometimes they might not even be aware that they are suffering from delusions. Um, and they could require hospitalization. Now, there is this phenomenon known as drug-induced schizophrenia. This is a real thing. It's a real medical condition. This is where people have done so much drugs like cocaine, heroin, LSD that they permanently lose contact with reality. I had contact with some of these people, homeless people that were on the streets in the United States. It's known that chronic drug use, hard drugs, and psychotropic drugs like LSD can, in some people, actually create a permanent schizophrenic condition. But there's also temporary schizophrenia as a result of drug use. These are people that take DMT or LSD and it turns on the schizophrenic gene. That's how some people explain it. If you like to think of it in other terms, like temporarily going insane. Um, there was a case in California in the community that I was from where a guy was withdrawing from methamphetamine and he went insane and killed a priest um, under the influence of methamphetamine. So withdrawal from drugs and temporary drug use or permanent long-term drug use can actually create drug-induced schizophrenia, and that's a real thing. But since the early 80s, and with the rise of antidepressant medications like Prozac and all this class of serotonin reuptake inhibitors and variations of these kinds of drugs, serotonin recyclers, serotonin non-recyclers, all these things. Those drugs can also produce a type of drug-induced schizophrenia, but it's not recognized in the same way. So if somebody shows up to the hospital with symptoms of schizophrenia, usually they don't ask, well, is this person under the influence of drugs? Do they have a bad reaction or maybe a side effect to an antidepressant medication? Especially if they've had a history of mental illness in the past, it's easier just to say, oh, diagnose that person with schizophrenia and there. I think there's more to the story because if someone is only schizophrenic while under the influence of these, whether street drugs or medications, then there's something else going on, especially if that's temporary. In the case of drug-induced psychosis over a long period of time, that's different. But this idea that mental illnesses, in this case schizophrenia, are a result of genetics or a result of chemical imbalances is a very exact science. But because the medical establishment works to also promote antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications, they're the least likely in their position, and they're the least likely to actually ask, is this person's psychosis maybe related to medication they're taking? And it can become a vicious cycle because then they're given more schizophrenic medication to actually cover up for something that maybe the medication was starting in the first place. Actually, we see this with old people and with the explosion of dementia cases, where maybe somebody later in life they go into a depression because of various things, and they're put on antidepressant medications. But then the antidepressant medications like Prozac and a lot of other ones, variations of these, create as a side effect, maybe not psychosis like with somebody that's younger, but could create symptoms that mimic dementia, like walking into somebody's bedroom in the middle of the night and thinking it was the bathroom, or leaving socks in the kitchen drawer or something like that. But when these old people are diagnosed with dementia, then they're given these drugs that then actually may have created dementia in the first place, and then kind of permanentize it along the way. I'm not saying this is the case for every person, but because the medical establishment exists, their reason for being is to promote drugs and to write prescriptions. It's very easy to overlook if these are actually somebody's experiencing side effects from the drugs. In fact, that's hardly a question that's ever asked. When it comes to drugs like benzodiazepine, Xanax, and all this class of drugs, there's a different type of side effects that also can then be confused with mental illness. But there's another reason, something that's slowly come to my awareness over many years, and I'm going to mention it because I think it's important. And it adds another level of complexity and subterfuge to a simple diagnosis of schizophrenia. And it's not so clear actually what schizophrenia is. That's the phenomenon of the targeted individual. These are people who have had chips implanted in them, and then voices are transmitted directly to their brain, bypassing the auditory nerve, and they hear about it. They hear these voices or radios as static, sometimes how it's described, but they hear it in the deep subconscious part of their brain, and it sounds real. Infrasound is, and this technology actually is real. And a lot of people that say, no, this is just sci-fi, they haven't encountered the admitted technology. For example, there's a publishing company in Alaska, Earth Pulse Press. I don't know if they're still around, but they were 15 years ago. I had some contact with them over the years. And one of the devices they sold was, it was like a little handheld stereo, but instead of putting the headphones on top of your ears, you attach these nodes to your throat, or you could attach them to your arm or any place on your skin, and it would beam the music directly into your head. You could have that experience of infrasound, like you're hearing it from a dream state. And in the past, those who have been targeted by these covert operations, and it could be that it's AI from satellite, and it's just beaming into you, not necessarily a person standing behind a microphone transmitting radio signals. These people have been dismissed as schizophrenic, and oftentimes people who have these experiences of being targeted and having a chip implanted in them or several chips implanted into them. Often there is a history of mental illness, and it's easier just to look at the mental illness and not just assume that these people are crazy, even though this is a thing. It's not recognized in the medical literature. In fact, most doctors would just dismiss these people as crazy. Just making the claim by itself, just making the claim that you're a targeted individual, that you had a chip implanted in you, that a covert operations are beaming voices into your head, just stating that by itself would get many people a diagnosis of schizophrenia, because that is considered delusion, even though it's a real thing. Vice magazine did an article about it a few years ago. There was a little documentary they made also on the subject. So schizophrenia is not such a clear-cut thing as a lot of people would make it. That's actually true for a lot of these syndromes and disorders, from ADD to bipolar. Often there's something else going on. So that's my 2 cents worth. Like I said, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a psychologist. But I think what we need now is somebody who's able to take a bird's eye view and look at these things across disciplines and make suggestions for new areas of research, and look at ways that maybe our understandings of these things have been flawed up to this point.